Hi, my name is Benedict. I watched most of a video, dipped through the later half, so I still have a sense of what he was saying, even if I didn't get every single word. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was about mixing, and specifically about masking. And he'd set up a lot of examples which, kudos to him, were incredibly clear, and he acknowledges that they were overdone so they could be clear. And yes, I agree, he'd done a great job in that way, far clearer than mine. But masking is where one sound tends to diminish or cover another. Here's an example very similar to his. We start with a piece of music. It's just a sine wave. And then we add a mask, in this case noise, until effectively our music, our sine wave, disappears. His was a lot more total than mine, but there's still, you get the idea. It's like, well, hang on, where's the music there? Well, there isn't any, there's just a nasty blast of noise. Okay, you can say, yeah, look, that's excessive, no idiot's going to mix that badly, it's... but again, just like he said, this is to make a point clear, and it is correct. There comes a certain point at which, you can try this yourself at home, boys and girls, just watch your levels, at which the content disappears and gets masked by the other thing that we ideally don't want, or we don't want in such a way as to mask the original thing. Masking is a genuine thing. Our human brains do it all the time. As you're focusing on me, you're probably masking out, choosing to ignore other things in your environment. Your wife, your sister, the cat, the boss ringing, whatever it is you don't want to pay attention to right now. So, yes, this happens, but no, this should not lead to a million ways to cut holes in things. So, of course, straight away it goes to saying, well, your solution is to do this kind of stuff, to find ways to hack a hole in your noise signal. See if we get our center correct, we can now increase the hearability of our music, our sine wave. Yes, technically correct and a good thing to know, because it is relevant. But that leads to all this kind of garbage that we see about mixing, about being ways to either cut holes in things so that other things can be heard. That's just kind of not right. Would you cut a hole in your wife's head so you can watch the football? And before you say yes, think very carefully, ignoring things like going to prison and meeting your future best friend Bubba. Is that really a viable solution? Probably not, especially if you hope to still have a wife, or at least that wife. Probably any future wife as well, because when she hears that you tend to cut a hole in your wife's head, it's not good thinking. It's solving a problem with an atomic weapon every single time. It doesn't work out very well. So this idea of chopping things out it's a logical conclusion, but it's a logic based on false logic. Because firstly, how often is that our piece of music is just the one single sine wave? Chances are it's... Where I play polyphonically, we're increasing the level of the noise, so that's not very fair. I'll play monophonically. As soon as there's movement, we can actually start to discern the content through the evil masking agent. Yes, there are some points there around the peak of the mask where it becomes less obvious. But if I were playing even this rather vague and unrecognisable piece of music, it still mostly makes sense, and we can assume the missing notes to a fair extent. Because it just makes sense that they would be there, which leads us to the other argument that gets disappeared with this whole sort of well, you just have to sidechain everything to duck everything out of the way, or you have to cut holes in things approach. It's a specious argument. Let's look at it this way. We've still got our piece of music, which is a sine wave, but how often is it a sine wave? We've already shown that if it moves around, we can unmask to a fair extent, because the human brain puts things together. But look at this. Let's go to a more complex signal. Oh, hang on. It's still surprisingly coherent. Balanced with noise is a little horrid. I mean, yes. It sounds like a cassette, but nonetheless, it's coherent. So this idea of cutting holes in things or constantly sidechaining, ducking things out of the way, just means that we're probably going about it the wrong way. Firstly, no one who is remotely sane would mix that way, but it does prove the point very, very well. If we bring these to more balanced levels, even at even Steven, it's very clear what we're doing. If we take a filter, let's use a more traditional sort of filtery filter. Although hideous, that amount of noise is not really causing us as many problems as we might think it is. Easy to say, oh, well, the level of A should duck B. So, but you see we've got artifacts, because we've got this little burst of noise before the compressor, the ducker, can actually make it happen. I know I'm doing this by hand. And we've got the rising noise as we let go. That probably makes it far more problematic than simply taking another instrument and saying, let's turn it down. Or let's decide, more to the point, which is more important. At the beginning of the piece of music, this noise may be really exactly what we want. We may say, not that one, this one, that we actually want our noise to be swooshing, because swooshiness is, well, cool. So we've got a moving mask. In fades our piece of music. Out fades our masky noise. That's how an arranger should arrange things. If they've simply sent a mix over where it's like this all the time, then they're probably not ready for mixing at all, because they haven't arranged things. So yes, the mix engineer can go, well, okay, at a certain point this noise isn't really useful anymore, and fade it out of the way, but that's the mix engineer making composition decisions, which is fine. We do that. And if your name's Trevor Horn, then, that's what you want to have happen. But, it's not the right way. As an artist, your job is to make sure that things don't fight with each other in a unnecessary way, unless, of course, you want them to fight. If we still want a little bit of noise, by all means. So now we have a very coherent signal. What we also have to consider, getting rid of noise altogether, opening up our filter, yes, it's pretty bright, is to say, well, okay, what happens with, let's just turn this down a little bit. What happens with masking? Here's an example. Here's the opposite of masking. We can pick out certain tones now that becomes part of the instrument. When we're listening to this, what pitch do we hear? Yes, we've overemphasized up here at 12.5K, but what pitch do we hear? We're actually hearing this pitch here. We're hearing our fundamental. And this is the bit that they miss with this whole duck everything, side chaining, or cut holes in everything, especially with the idea that, oh, we would cut holes here in our noise. Or boost this to make it overcome. We'd probably be better off boosting up here. Simply because we've got this overtone series. And if you don't understand overtone series, you need to do the basics on it. But basically, the human brain is designed in such a way, God love it, that when it hears something here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, it knows that there is something here. It knows it's here, not here, or here. It knows where it is, here. So it actually tends to turn it up. And now that's done in context. A smart mix engineer, if he's wanting that to seem more bassy, rather than doing this, will commonly do something like this. Finding the first harmonic and boosting that. If you do it just a little bit, you give it more presence. Now, anytime you've heard one of those ooey booms or the JBLs with the sides that go blub, 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 and they seem like they're super bassy until you really stop and think, hang on, how low do I hear? How low can you go bass? You realise that you're hearing probably bass up here, because that little tub can't produce down here. It's physically not possible because it's just not big enough. So it's illusion of creating emphasis on the overtones to make you feel like you're hearing this whoopee 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 kind of a thing. That's the opposite side of masking, but we can do the same. We can say, okay, I want to cut a hole. And that's changing the timbre of our instrument. Like a clarinet versus an oboe versus an English horn. They're still playing the same note, when they're playing the same note. They're still just a fart through a tube with some overtones, but they've got different balance of overtones, and that creates this versus this. It's a little more complex than that, but it's basically how it works. So if you think you've got one signal masking another, firstly, just look at a balance where they don't do it. And that's before you get into going, but I have to sidechain it with a ducking and ducking sidechainer, like a total spangazoid, because you're missing the fact that you've probably got a lot more happening than sine waves in your music. Even if your sub bass, your sub is probably useless without some overtones. So look at, well, how do I find a point at which this will come through? Like there, I've suddenly made this a lot more hearable, even on a little ooey boom or a JBL thing that's, this big. So focus on what can I pull forward rather than what can I hack holes in. Because as soon as you start hacking holes in things, sooner or later, some of your sounds are going to start to sound like this, not like that. That's the wrong kind of shape. And that's really not the same sound at all. And fine, it's easy if we're not doing classical or jazz or something like that to say who gives a flying banana peel what the sound sounds like. You kind of have an argument. But at the same time, once you've cut holes in everything, you've got this band-passed sound, comb-filtered sound. And if every sound is comb-filtered, guess what that sounds like? It sounds like a Z80 chip. Space Invaders. It sounds horrid. And your whole mix is full of these, what I refer to as lemon juice, scratchy, ghastly, creepy sounds that are like, eh. and then you do a whole lot of other things to try to solve that. Oh, but it's not beefy anymore. No, because you just gutted it, dude. So, if we want this to seem like a beefy sound, let's find a point at which we can make it seem more beefy. Some of what is causing our perception of unbeefiness is masking. So let's roll some off. But if we roll too much of that off, then we end up with a lack of ability to pull through. So we might then find another point at which it comes through. Nasty? Warm. Now this isn't within a mix, but this makes more sense. This is what we're supposed to understand from psychoacoustics, not the let's get 2 meters down the path and decide that the next 4,000 kilometers are going to be like this, because we've missed the point entirely. If you understand masking, then you have to understand all the stuff that comes after that before you get to Valhalla, Nirvana, whatever. Otherwise, yeah, you're just going to hack holes in things, either by saying, I've got to duck every instrument out of the way of every other instrument. That ain't how reality works, boys and girls. Yes, you can get the dum-dum-dum-dum trance thing, but it's horrid, and only suited for one situation, where you want to go dum-dum-dum and make trance music. Every other situation, it sounds bloody awful to anybody who isn't looking for the dum-dum-dum thing. And that's fair enough. If you've got an audience of people who want the dum-dum-dum thing, by all means give them that. That's what they're going to give you money for. Doesn't mean it's good, but you do that to a classical record, to a jazz record, to my records, to a rock record, and it sounds bloody awful. This is part of why modern rock bands just can't compete with bands from the 70s, 80s, even the early 90s, simply because those mixes were well done with a deeper understanding than the sidechain it, cut holes in it, because those engineers understood this psychoacoustics much better. I want that to pull through, balance it so that it works inside the mix. It does take some time to understand this, and in no way was this presented as a tutorial, really more just a warning to say, if you start down this road of understanding, and I really, really encourage everyone to do it, even if you don't plan to be a mix engineer, you want to work in music, this is core understanding far more than the notes even, to some extent. You can get a long way with this kind of deep understanding compared to transient understanding of anything, because this is what really makes music work. So take your time. Do not fall for this trick that a trick gets you anywhere. There is no trick. You simply understand how psychoacoustics works fully, and rather than using the tiniest piece of knowledge against yourself by going, oh, I'll just duck everything out of the way of everything else, because that's not how reality works. You work out, okay, how do I create the balance that achieves the feel that I want, or most importantly, that the scene and story of this piece wants? As I said, that attempt to dum-dum-dum sidechain in rock just makes it sound like shite. Because rock is supposed to be a real thing. We're supposed to have 4 or 5 sweaty, stinky guys up there going karang, karang, karang. And therefore it has to feel like a thing that's happening. And when it feels like over-processed vomit stew, nobody wants to take that on, which is why Zeppelin records are probably outselling pretend to be Zeppelin bands. Okay, if you have questions, more importantly, if you want somebody to actually do this stuff for you, train you, whatever, reach out, talk to me.